Leela's heart pounded as she walked the empty streets at midnight. The moonlight cast pale silver streaks across the cobblestones, illuminating the decay of the old district she had once called home. The wind whispered through broken windows, carrying the faint smell of smoke and dust, remnants of the fire that had taken everything from her. Every step echoed in the emptiness, and each shadow seemed to slither with intent. She tightened her grip on the dagger hidden beneath her coat, its cold metal a small comfort against the terror gnawing at her chest. Then she saw him, a figure leaning casually against the crumbling brick of an alleyway, his presence so commanding it drew the light from the moon itself. Damien, the vampire who had killed her family, whose name she had whispered in tears and rage for years, stood before her. His eyes, dark and fathomless, locked onto hers, and for a moment, the world around her dissolved. Fear twisted in her stomach, yet beneath it, a strange, dizzying pull tugged at her. She hated him, or at least she thought she did, but her pulse betrayed her. Every instinct screamed for revenge, but every beat of her heart whispered a dangerous curiosity, one she could neither resist nor fully understand. Just as she raised the dagger, trembling hands refusing to obey the terror in her mind, he was gone, vanished into the night as if the shadows themselves had swallowed him. Leela sank to the ground, gasping for air, whispering to herself in disbelief, "Why can't I hate him?" Days passed in a haze of restless dreams and sleepless nights. Leela found herself retracing the same empty streets, driven by an obsession she refused to name. Each corner, each alleyway seemed to hum with his presence, as though the city itself were conspiring to bring her face to face with the monster who had ruined her life. Her friends had urged her to leave, to escape the memories and the hunt that had become her life, but she could not. The ache of loss, of the laughter and warmth she had been robbed of, had cemented a cold determination in her veins. Yet each time she imagined confronting him again, her stomach twisted in anticipation not solely of vengeance, but of the uncanny magnetism she felt in his absence. His name had once been a curse on her lips, but now it echoed in her mind in ways that confused and infuriated her. That night, a soft rain slicked the streets, making the cobblestones glisten like obsidian. She saw him then, standing beneath the flickering light of an old lamp, so still he seemed carved from shadow. Leela's breath caught as she noticed how the rain traced delicate lines across his flawless skin, and for a moment, she allowed herself a thought she immediately fought to reject. He was beautiful. Not humanly so, but a cruel, dangerous beauty that drew her in despite everything she knew. She wanted to scream, to run, to plunge the dagger into his heart, yet all she could do was stand rooted, caught between terror and fascination. And when he finally spoke, his voice a velvet caress against the roar of the rain, she found herself unable to answer. "I wondered if you'd come," he murmured, a faint, unreadable smile brushing his lips. The tension between them stretched taut like a wire about to snap, every heartbeat resonating in the cold night air. Leela's mind reeled with questions. How could she feel anything but hatred for the being who had destroyed her world? Yet, when Damien stepped closer, the danger seemed almost irrelevant compared to the storm of longing he stirred within her. The city around them faded into insignificance. The night became a suspended moment, fragile and alive. Then, just as the dagger trembled in her grasp, ready to act on instincts that warred with her confusion, a whisper of movement came from the shadows behind her. Leela froze, every nerve screaming that someone or something was there. Damien's eyes narrowed slightly, his attention flicking to the darkness with a predator's precision. He reached out, almost lazily, yet with undeniable command, as if sensing the threat before it fully emerged. Her pulse thundered in her ears. For a moment, she dared to hope he might protect her, even though the memory of his betrayal made her recoil. But the shadows shifted in ways that made her stomach clench with icy dread, and the hairs on the back of her neck rose. Damien's gaze returned to her, and a flicker of something unspoken passed between them, a warning, a promise, or perhaps a secret neither was ready to voice. "They're coming," he said quietly, and Leela's heart stopped. She tried to step back, but her legs felt like lead. The dagger slipped from her fingers, clattering against the wet cobblestones. Her eyes darted to the alleyway's end, and there, in the darkness, a pair of glowing eyes reflected the streetlight. Not his, something else, something waiting. And as the rain washed over her, chilling her to the bone, she realized that her life, and perhaps her heart, were on the cusp of being claimed by forces she could neither fight nor flee. Leela tracked Damien night after night, moving through empty streets, abandoned warehouses, and forgotten alleyways like a shadow herself. Each encounter left her breathless, torn between the urge to strike and the undeniable pull she felt toward him. He never hid from her, never fled. Instead, he lingered in the periphery, watching her with those dark, unreadable eyes that seemed to see every thought, every desire she tried to bury. Damien spoke rarely, but when he did, his words were coated with a melancholy that both maddened and fascinated her. He told her of centuries spent wandering, of a solitude deeper than any grave, of the endless regret of lives he had touched and ruined. And yet, each confession was punctuated by the same chilling reminder, I am who I am. I cannot change. That statement, repeated in countless forms, became both a shield and a chain, binding Leela to a truth she could neither fight nor accept. Nights blurred into one another. Rain-soaked streets, moonlit towers, and crumbling bridges became the stages for her obsession, and her anger the anger that had fueled her from the moment she discovered her family as fate clashed violently with an unfamiliar, forbidden desire. Every time she imagined plunging her dagger into his heart, her pulse betrayed her, throbbing with an intensity that had nothing to do with fear. Something in the way he moved, the faint brush of his hand when he offered guidance through a narrow street, the subtle tilt of his head when he spoke. It was maddening, impossible, and intoxicating. Leela hated herself for it, and yet she could not stop. The pursuit escalated one cold, fog-draped night when Damien led her to the outskirts of the city, to the ruins of an abandoned cathedral that had been left to rot since a fire decades ago. The air was thick with the scent of wet stone and decay, and the broken stained glass windows cast fractured colors across the cracked floors, painting the remnants of the sanctuary in an eerie, otherworldly light. Leela followed silently, dagger gripped tight in her hands, muscles tense, every sense alert. Damien moved like a shadow, silent and graceful, his presence at once thrilling and terrifying. When they reached the center of the cathedral, he stopped, turning to face her fully. His eyes glimmered in the muted light, reflecting a mixture of warning, regret, and something far more vulnerable that made Leela's stomach twist in ways she refused to name. Her fingers ached around the hilt of the dagger, yet it felt heavier than ever, weighed down by emotions she could neither disentangle nor suppress. Leela, he said softly, his voice almost a whisper that echoed through the cavernous space. You do not understand what you are asking of yourself. You cannot, his words faltered as he saw her resolve, fierce and unyielding, yet trembling at the edges. She felt herself falling inwards, spiraling toward a dangerous edge where hate and desire collided. She wanted him dead, yes, but she also wanted to understand him, to feel the warmth of the man beneath the monster. Her dagger wavered, and in that split second, she realized the truth she had been running from. She was falling not just into his world, but for him, the monster who had destroyed her world. The revelation hit her like ice, sharp and paralyzing. Her hand shook violently, unsure if it held the dagger as a weapon or a lifeline to some fragile sense of connection she had never allowed herself to feel. Then the sound shattered the tension, a low, chilling laugh, hollow and resonant, echoing off the cathedral walls. Leela froze, the dagger slipping slightly in her grip. The ground beneath them groaned, and then cracked, the old stone splintering in a jagged line that ran like a scar from the altar to the entrance. Dust and debris rained down from the ceiling as the air turned cold, unnatural, as though the night itself had exhaled a warning. Damien's eyes widened, a flash of something primal and fearful breaking through his calm, controlled exterior. We're not alone, he muttered, his voice taut with urgency. Leela's heart pounded, every instinct screaming that danger had arrived, though the source remained hidden in the shadows. The cathedral seemed alive, as if the ruins themselves were responding to some unseen force, the walls vibrating with a power that made her skin crawl. In that moment, the fragile trust, the dangerous attraction that had drawn her to him, became a weapon against them both, as fragile human emotion clashed with something far older, far darker than either of them. Damien reached for her, not gently, but with a protective precision, his hand gripping her arm and grounding her in the chaos, his eyes searching hers for understanding. "Stay close," he warned, and in that instant, Lilo understood that whatever had come into the cathedral with them was a threat unlike anything she had ever faced. A shadow shifted at the edge of her vision, impossibly fast, and the laughter echoed again, closer this time, reverberating in a way that felt almost sentient. Lila felt the world tilt beneath her, her pulse hammering not with fear alone, but with a sense of impending revelation, of a secret that could shatter everything she thought she knew about Damien herself and the night. The ground cracked further, a deep chasm opening between them and the cathedral's grand doors, and a cold wind roared up from the fissure, carrying with it a whisper of voices, many voices, both human and inhuman. Damien's gaze met hers, intense, urgent, and raw, the centuries of his loneliness laid bare in a single look. "You should never have come here," he said, but there was no anger in his tone, only a quiet dread. The dagger felt useless in her hand, insignificant against the unknown force that stirred beneath the shattered stone. And yet Lila could not move, could not flee, caught in the gravity of the moment, caught between the pull toward Damien and the pull toward something darker, something that promised to change everything she thought she knew about life, death, and desire. As the laughter crescendoed into a sound that seemed to surround them and the cathedral shivered with unnatural life, Lila realized with a sinking certainty that this night, which had begun as a confrontation of hearts and hatred, had become the threshold of something far more perilous. Something ancient. Something that had been waiting for them both. And in the flickering shadows, beneath the fractured light of the cathedral windows, Damien stepped closer to her, eyes locked on hers, and whispered, "Whatever happens next, there is no turning back." The chasm widened suddenly, sending a shudder through the crumbling floor. Dust and debris rained around them as the laughter shifted, now tinged with malevolence, echoing from the depths below. Lila's stomach dropped. The cathedral no longer felt like a sanctuary but a trap, an arena for forces that neither she nor Damien could fully comprehend. She tried to pull back, tried to steady her shaking hands around the dagger, but it was useless. Her mind raced, fragments of fear, longing, anger, and desire colliding in a storm she could neither control nor escape. Damien's grip on her arm tightened, steady and commanding, anchoring her in the chaos. Yet even his presence could not dispel the sense of impending doom that pressed against them like the weight of centuries. The laughter evolved into a chant, low and guttural, yet strangely familiar, as if echoing truths long buried in the shadows of the cathedral. Lila's breath caught as she recognized the syllables, ancient and forbidden, vibrating against her bones. Her pulse thundered in her ears, a frantic rhythm that mirrored the tremors of the crumbling floor beneath them. What is that?" she managed to whisper, her voice trembling. Damien's eyes darkened, storm clouds of centuries-old knowledge flickering in their depths. "Something older than you, older than me." "And far more patient," he replied, his voice tight with an emotion she could not name. Then, as if in answer to some silent command, the shadows shifted at the edges of her vision. Shapes formed and twisted, something monstrous and impossible, its presence filling the cathedral with a cold so deep it seemed to drain the warmth from her very blood. Lila could only stare, heart hammering, as the being or whatever it was rose from the darkness, its eyes glinting with cruel intelligence and a hunger that no mortal or immortal she had ever known could sat. Damien's hand lingered on her arm, a tenuous tether, and his frown deepened, warning clear and chilling. "If you step forward," he said, voice low and strained, "I cannot promise what will remain of you." Or of me. Lila's grip on the dagger faltered as her mind struggled to reconcile the impossible. All the hatred, all the desire, all the obsession that had driven her here now collided with the sheer terror of what awaited them. The laughter rose again, now joined by guttural whispers echoing through the cathedral's vast, broken expanse, wrapping around them like a living thing. She tried to move, tried to retreat, but the cracked floor groaned beneath her feet, the chasm widening as if testing her resolve. Damien's eyes met hers again, dark, solemn, and filled with something she had never seen before, fear. And in that fear, Leela felt the terrifying, irresistible lure of what they faced. The dagger in her hand felt absurd, a fragile token against the ancient, unseen force that stirred in the shadows. Yet she could not release it, could not flee. Every instinct screamed for her to run, to survive, but some deeper, darker part of her, the part that had been drawn to Damien despite everything, remained rooted, captivated, and powerless. And as the shadows shifted again, forming a figure even taller and more terrifying than before, and the chasm widened to a yawning maw beneath their feet, Leela realized that the night was far from over. Whatever had been waiting in the darkness had chosen this moment, chosen them, and the choice they had made in following this dangerous desire had led them to a precipice from which there would be no return. The laughter echoed one final haunting note before silence fell like a suffocating shroud, and the cathedral trembled as if holding its breath, leaving Leela and Damien poised on the edge of something unimaginable, staring into a darkness that promised both revelation and annihilation. Leela could no longer sleep, no longer walk the streets without being haunted by visions of her family's smiling faces twisted in terror, echoing screams that refused to fade. Each image was a knife in her chest, a reminder of the life stolen by Damien, the monster she simultaneously feared and craved. She moved like a ghost through the remnants of her past, chasing whispers of vengeance that led her deeper into forbidden knowledge. In an abandoned library hidden beneath the ruins of the city's old quarter, she discovered an ancient manuscript, brittle with age, the pages filled with incantations and diagrams that promised one impossible thing: mortality for the immortal. The ritual could strip Damien of his vampiric power, force him into a fragile human body, but it came with a deadly cost. Every spell required a life to balance the scales, and the price, the manuscript warned in scrawled, bleeding letters, would be hers. Leela traced the illustrations with trembling fingers, the dagger still strapped to her thigh, her heartbeat thundering in her ears. Her mind whirled with the possibilities: to end Damien now, to finally avenge her family, or to save him from the endless curse he claimed he could not escape. And yet, even as rage burned like fire in her chest, a contradictory pull of desire anchored her in place. She hated him. She loved him. She wanted to kill him. She wanted to save him. Every thought tore her into, each step toward him, a surrender to both love and rage, until the very act of breathing felt like betrayal and devotion entwined. As the full moon rose high above the shattered rooftops of the city, casting silver light over crumbling walls and empty streets, Leela made her way to the cathedral, the site of their last encounter. Her hands shook, clutching the manuscript and dagger, and her breath came in ragged bursts. The ruins were silent now, save for the whisper of wine through broken windows and the faint echo of water dripping from the ceiling. There, in the center of the cathedral, stood Damien, tall and unnervingly serene, the shadows clinging to him like a living cloak. The air seemed to hum with expectation, charged with an energy neither of them could ignore. When he saw her, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips, but his eyes were shadowed with centuries of pain. Leela's resolve wavered, but she pressed on, stepping into the cathedral, feeling every heartbeat echo in the emptiness around them. Damien's gaze followed her, intense and unwavering, until he finally extended his hand, palm up, a gesture that spoke of trust and warning in equal measure. "You could save me, or destroy me," he whispered, his voice low and raw, resonating with the weight of the choices she faced. Her fingers hovered above his, trembling, the manuscript clutched in her other hand, the ritual's words already forming on her lips. Every instinct screamed to turn away, to flee from the impossible path she had chosen, but her need for justice, for closure, was stronger than fear. The cathedral seemed to contract around them, the air thick with heat and anticipation, as if the night itself waited with bated breath. Flames began to flicker along the edges of the stone floor, a supernatural dance that cast their shadows long and unsteady across the walls, illuminating the ruins in hellish gold and crimson. Lila's chest tightened, but she could not stop. The ritual began. Her voice, low and trembling, wove the incantation, calling on forces that were both ancient and dangerous, speaking words that seemed to vibrate against the bones of the cathedral itself. The flames around them spiraled higher, circling their bodies like living serpents, casting every shadow into motion. Damien did not move, he did not resist, though a visible tension ran through him, a war between surrender and survival playing across his expression. Lila felt the energy pull at her, tugging at her very essence, every fiber of her being vibrating with a dangerous, intoxicating power. She glimpsed herself reflected in the firelight pale, trembling, and unrecognizable, and for a fraction of a second, she thought she saw both the girl who had been shattered by loss and the woman who might destroy or redeem a monster. Damien's hand found hers at last, steadying her trembling fingers, and the warmth of his skin ignited a fire that competed with the flames around them. "Lila," he murmured, voice hoarse but urgent. "Once this begins, there's no turning back. You understand that, don't you?" She nodded, unable to speak, the weight of inevitability pressing down on her. The incantation surged, the flames roaring, and the air thickened until it seemed the cathedral itself might burst into fire. Lila could feel the toll it would take on her body, her soul, her life, but there was no time for hesitation. She had crossed a line from which there was no return. Every heartbeat was an eternity as the ritual spiraled, as fire danced, as shadows twisted and reached, and she realized that her destiny was bound to Damien's in ways she could neither predict nor control. The night fell silent suddenly, a heavy, suffocating pause that left only the crackle of flames and the scent of burnt stone in the air. And in that stillness, Lila understood the truth of the moment. She had begun something that could save him or destroy him, and in the end, she might not survive to see the answer. Her hand remained in his, their fingers entwined in a fragile tether between two worlds, as the last ember of light flickered and faded. Outside, the wind whispered through the broken windows, carrying with it a chill that spoke of consequences yet to come. Lila's heart pounded, every nerve taut, as she dared not move, dared not breathe too loudly, because she could feel at the unseen force that had waited for this night, that had been watching, waiting for the balance to tip. And then, just as her lips parted to speak the final word of the incantation, a shadow moved across the wall, impossibly swift, impossibly silent. The flames wavered, the cathedral trembled, and Lila realized, with a mixture of terror and exhilaration, that whatever force had been lurking in the darkness was not only aware of her actions, it was coming for them. She met Damien's eyes, seeing in them the same shock, the same awareness of peril, and knew with absolute certainty that the night had not ended, it had only begun. When the last embers of the ritual died away, the cathedral fell into a profound silence. The air, once thick with the heat and power of the flames, was now still, cool, and heavy with the scent of stone and faint smoke. Lila's chest heaved as if she had been running a marathon, and her hands shook, still gripping the dagger that had once felt like an extension of her will. She lowered it slowly, the metal cold and meaningless in her grasp. The tension that had gripped her for weeks, the obsession, the hatred, and even the dangerous longing that had drawn her toward Damien, all began to fade like fog under the morning sun. For a long moment, she simply stood, listening to the quiet, the soft drip of water from the cathedral's fractured ceiling, the whisper of wine through the broken stained glass, the gentle sigh of the stone beneath her feet. And then she realized, with a mixture of relief and disbelief, that Damien was gone, not dead, not destroyed, but vanished. He had chosen to leave, or perhaps the ritual had set him free in ways neither of them fully understood. She did not feel triumph, nor the hollow satisfaction of revenge fulfilled. Instead, a deep, settling calm wrapped around her like a warm cloak. The rage that had burned in her chest for so long, the burning need to make Damien pay for the life he had stolen, had dissolved in the choice she had made. Forgiveness, not violence, had guided her hand. Her fingers loosened entirely around the dagger, letting it clatter to the stone floor, its echo loud in the cathedral's empty expanse. Leela bent to pick it up and then, shaking her head, left it where it lay. She understood now that it no longer mattered. The ritual had not ended in destruction, but in release and acknowledgement that some battles are won not through blood or death, but through compassion, understanding, and the courage to let go. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply, tasting the cool, fresh air that had replaced the smoky heat of the flames. Somewhere in the distance, a bird chirped. The world continued to turn, indifferent and yet comforting in its constancy. When Leela finally stepped outside, the city was waking. Morning mist rolled lazily over cobblestone streets, softening the sharp edges of the ruined cathedral and the remnants of her turbulent nights. The first golden rays of sunlight spilled across the rooftops, lighting up puddles left by a long-past rain, reflecting fragments of a world that seemed untouched by her pain. She could almost imagine the world as it had been before her life had fractured, before she had lost her family, before the shadow of vengeance had consumed her. And yet, she knew the truth. Nothing would ever be the same again, and that was all right. The experiences, the heartbreak, the dangerous desires, and the rituals had changed her, reshaped her into someone who could carry both sorrow and understanding at the same time. The warmth of life, fragile and fleeting, seemed to seep back into her bones, and she realized that the act of choosing forgiveness over vengeance had freed not just Damien, but herself. She could now move forward without the weight of hatred, the corrosive bitterness that had nearly devoured her from within. As she walked, Leela thought of Damien, the centuries he had endured, and the solitude that had defined his existence. She felt no longing to possess him, no desperate need to tether him to her life. Instead, she felt a quiet empathy, a deep recognition that his pain, like hers, was part of the world he could not escape. Her heart ached with a gentle sorrow, a sense of loss without bitterness, and a warmth that was tender rather than dangerous. For the first time since that night when her family was taken, she felt a kind of peace or realization that love does not always demand possession, that sometimes it is strongest when it is freely given and then released. The lessons of the past weeks, the confrontation, the pursuit, the ritual, the temptation to destroy and be destroyed had crystallized into something luminous and simple. Vengeance could never heal, but compassion could. Leela returned to her home as the city fully awakened, the streets now alive with vendors opening their stalls, the chatter of early risers, and the scent of fresh bread carried on the breeze. She walked slowly, savoring each moment of ordinary life, aware of how precious it was, how fleeting, how easily it could be lost or taken away. Her gaze lingered on the people around her, each absorbed in their own lives, and she felt a connection to them that she had not known in years of shared fragility and resilience that mirrored her own journey. The sorrow in her heart remained quiet and steady, a reminder of what had been taken from her, but it was accompanied by understanding, by the knowledge that she had acted with courage and that her choice had transcended the narrow bounds of anger and retribution. She realized she had faced darkness and, through her own humanity, illuminated a path forward for both herself and another being who had lived in the shadow of centuries. She paused by the edge of a fountain, watching the sunlight dance across its rippling surface, and thought again of Damien. She could almost imagine him somewhere out there, walking beneath the morning sky, the heavy weight of immortality still on his shoulders, yet lighter in some way because she had chosen mercy. The warmth of that thought, fragile but undeniable, settled in her chest, leaving her with a quiet smile. It was a smile not of joy alone, nor of relief alone, but of a hard-earned understanding. Life was fleeting, love could take unexpected forms, and sometimes the greatest power one could wield was the ability to let go. Leela's heart, once a battlefield of rage and desire, now carried a calm strength, the kind that comes from knowing she had acted not out of fear or vengeance, but out of the deepest recognition of what it means to be human. And so she returned to her home, carrying with her the lessons of loss, love, and release. She knew that her journey would not erase her grief entirely, nor would it remove the scar left by the night that had changed everything. But she understood now that grief need not harden into hatred, and that the capacity for forgiveness, even for a creature like Damien, was a testament to the resilience of the human heart. The morning sun illuminated her path forward, and Leela stepped into it fully, neither looking back with longing nor forward with fear, but embracing the moment with all the courage and compassion she could summon. She realized, with quiet certainty, that sometimes love means letting go, and that the choices she had made that night, choices of mercy, courage, and understanding, would forever define her. Revenge may destroy, but forgiveness transforms.